talking about Rex Beach room. This is a very, very special room and a great part of the history of the college. And Rex, of course, was a great, great friend of Father Murray's. And this is a collection of Rex's books. He was a great author, wonderful author. And in here, there's just a real treasure of Rex's and George Matthew Adams' history that is a vital, vital part of the history of Notre Dame. Who worked for George Matthew Adams was Rex Beach. And Rex Beach started out his life like you are going to start your life out, with a dream. And he started out his life dreaming about the gold rush. He was going to make his fortune in the Klondike. But in 3.5 years in the Klondike, he nearly starved to death. He couldn't find gold to save his life. But the gold he found, as Father Murray said, was inside himself. And that was the ability to write stories. And what he did was he used his experience in the Klondike. Every one of his books, every one of his stories is based in the Klondike. He came to know it so intimately that all his characters are set in the Klondike. So they have that sense of authenticity. And many of them were made into movies. And that was his skill. And you will find that you have hidden skills too. And over here, here's a wonderful piece of history. This is Rex Beach on this side, meeting with Jack London. Jack London, a very, very famous author from that era. And Jack and Rex became great friends. This took place just over 100 years ago. This is a very famous boxing match. See the boxing ring in the background? Open air. And this was known as the fight of the century. This is the first time a boxing match was authorized that had an African American and a white man. The African American was Jack Johnson, and the white man was James J. Jeffries, sometimes referred to as the J fight. And Jack Johnson, the man with the darker skin, was the winner, which was not a very popular decision at that time. Now, Rex Beach was sent by George Matthew Adams. Rex Beach was sent to cover that fight. 1910. Remember, back then, no tape recorders. You had to write everything down. So he would describe the fight in a reporter's shorthand. He would describe the fight round by round, blow by blow. And at the end of the fight, he would put his story together, and then he would cable it to New York to George Matthew Adams, his boss, and from there it would go out to all the newspapers across the US and across the world. Now, all of these things were sent to us, to Father Murray, by George Matthew Adams. There's a little historical touch. This Rex Beach, this is an illustration of Rex Beach by James Montgomery Flagg. James Montgomery Flagg was the illustrator who, during World War II, illustrated probably one of the most famous visions ever produced for the United States forces. And it's the one with the pointed finger that says, "I want you in the American Army." great recruiting illustration. Probably one of the most famous illustrations in the world. Now this wall is an amazing wall. This wall is constructed of stone from 30 miles south of Wilcox. The Badlands. Have you ever heard of the Badlands? Have you been down to the Badlands? No, down in the Avonlea area. All stone from the Badlands. But embedded in the wall are gifts to Father Murray. And many of them tell their own story. This, for example, is a piece of pyrite called Fool's Gold.
Fool's Gold.
That, you can imagine, that broke the heart of many a prospector who thought he had made it rich. This is the African carving I was referring to, a gift. This is a World War I machine gun shell. So here's a plaque. Father Murray wanted to preserve everything in bronze, everything of importance, so that here today you guys can read it and see what it stands for, And this is written by, these are the words of Father Murray. Stranger, you stand in the All-American Memorial to Rex Beach, 1877, 1949. Architect of friendliness and unity, explorer of Klondike gold, big game hunter, foremost virile novelist of America. This is how Father Murray, and just imagine, he had such a wonderful gift of language, and he was a great orator. He said twice, he sojourned in 36 and 41 at Notre Dame and gave it world publicity, which he did through the articles he had written. Now, the other important thing to Notre Dame is that Rex Beach left Notre Dame a legacy. When he died, he left Notre Dame a third of his estate. And that third of his estate amounted to $100,000. An incredible gift, especially back then. It was a huge amount of money. That $100,000 built the first brick and mortar building on the campus. The first brick and mortar building on the campus was Varsity Hall. Once that started to build, there was an amazing run of the next 12 years where we saw new brick schools, new brick and mortar dormitories, 2 of them, new church. We saw the Tower of God. We saw an Olympic-size arena, the first in Saskatchewan, first in Western Canada, within 12 years. And that was all started by Rex Beach, that one act, that one donation. And within that first building, which was Varsity Hall, Father Murray had a little room built in honor of Rex Beach. So when we took down this wall and brought the room over to the museum here, we reassembled the wall as closely as was possible to what it was in Varsity Hall. But once that first brick and mortar building was built, other people who could donate came and supported Notre Dame, because now it was building permanent buildings. Before that, it was the wooden shacks. And the wooden shacks, of course, the landscape of the wooden shack college changed almost on a yearly basis. Because some shacks would be destroyed by weather and storm, but mostly fire. And so for many people who wanted to support Notre Dame and loved what Father Murray was doing, they couldn't seem to feel comfortable with putting money into wooden shacks. So when Rex Beach's gift, which started the whole new face of Notre Dame, arrived, and so they saw what Father Murray was doing with this money, they all supported and gathered round. And that's why all of the buildings of today are all of the result of that one gift. The rest of the wall. This was one of Father Murray's favorites. This is a petrified, this is a bison heart, and this is solidified, turned to stone. Amazing.
That's interesting.
This intriguing little one here, this is a fire starter. You see, you can start by rubbing the right piece of wood. So you can start a fire by friction. This is probably my personal favorite story. It's a beautiful, emotional piece of George Matthew Adams. Non omnis moria is Latin for not all of me will die. Because you will leave a legacy. That's what it is. You know, when you leave a legacy. And I must read this to you because it's one of my favorites. There is an earthly end to each of our lives. We should plan to make this ending one of triumph and pride. So, in other words, make the best of your life. So wrote William James, the great use of life is to spend it for something that outlasts it. What nobler purpose could any of us have to whatever has been meted out to us in life? We should be proud and happy to give extension. None of our treasures can be taken with us. We know that. Let us put them in nests of love, where they can continually hatch beauty for the joy of many. And then he says, my dear friend Rex Beach gave a wonderful gift to a small Western Canada college. It pleased me. It was so characteristic of Beach to do such a kind act. The school is located at Wilcox, Saskatchewan, and it is known as Notre Dame of Canada. This little devil here, smooth, feel that.
Wow.
Isn't that smooth? That is a stone axe head. Here we have the explorer, Rex Beach, paddling down the stream. What a nice little one that is. And down here, it's a hammerhead. It would be tied to a handle with rawhide. This is an interesting guy, isn't it? This is a black powder revolver. I believe the date of the gun is about 1860, 61, somewhere around there. And here, the final bronze plaque of George Matthew Adams. And this is on the death of Rex Beach. And, you know, you can imagine Father Murray was just devastated with that news. A wonderful friend, wrote many great articles. And he spent a lot of time in the company of Father Murray. But Rex could never, for the rest of his life, get out of his head what this remarkable man was doing to try and give an education to the young people who could not afford it out here on the prairies.